Guys, we're here for another reaction video. This video, I've not seen it yet. It's just put on this tab right up here. But the video is about how much money people need to make to feel financially secure and higher income people living paycheck to paycheck. There was a stat that came out a year or two ago where it said the average person making six figures, not the average, some big percentage live paycheck to paycheck. And that's an absurd thing to think about. But it's the reality a lot of times when we live in a consumer society and people like to spend money and enjoy it. So let's watch this video and I will, I'm sure, have comments about it.
The average American says they need to earn $233,000 a year to be financially comfortable. But in 2021, American workers on average made only $75,203 annually.
Americans are sort of looking at how much money they would like to have to be financially secure, and that ends up being basically 3 times what the average income is in this country. And to be essentially wealthy or really successful, it's magnitudes above that.
72% of Americans said they weren't financially secure given their current finances. And more than a quarter of Americans said they'll likely never be financially secure.
By the numbers, their debt is lower and their savings are higher coming out of the pandemic, but they're more anxious about what's going to happen next, if they have job stability, if they're going to be able to have secure retirement.
With well over half of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, many are failing to meet some of their modest financial goals.
There are actually millions of people struggling. It's not something that people want to talk about, but if you're in a place where your financial security feels super precarious, you're not alone. And it's not your fault.
So how did it become?
And that's wrong. How can we say it's not your fault? That's absurd. I know people making $50,000 to $55,000 a year who save $15,000 a year. That might sound like an absurd amount of money, but it's true. Like when I hear that, when she says it's not your fault, that is absolutely incorrect. It absolutely is your fault. No matter what your income level is. My sister does not make a lot of money and she saves a ton. She just doesn't spend a lot. That's it. It is your fault. Now, with that said, I'm active on Twitter and it drives me nuts when I see people on Twitter saying things like, oh, in order to be financially secure, you have to drive a 2004 Corolla. No, you don't. You just have to make smart decisions. If a car is very important to you, you have to make sacrifices elsewhere if you cannot afford certain things. Fine. That's fine. The problem we have is we have this world in which we're telling people it's not your fault that you spend 100% of your paycheck or more. Yes, it is. No one is telling you what to spend on. You might sit there and say, well, advertisement, they're living this life. Great. Then turn off your TV, turn off Instagram, turn off Facebook. We still have to be able to hold ourselves accountable for things. It absolutely is your fault. I was fine with this video until that lady said that. That's absolutely the dumbest thing I've heard, and she should be absolutely barred from speaking. That's insane to say it's not your fault. It is your fault if you don't save enough money. If you don't live within your means, it is 100% your fault. No one else's. Yours.
It becomes so difficult to be financially secure in America. And what can you do about it?
Spend less money.
Let's do some budgeting. Americans working full-time earned a median monthly income of about $4,400 during the second quarter of 2023. The average worker takes home 75.2% of gross wages after taxes and benefits, shrinking the take-home pay to about $3,308. And that just isn't enough to cover the cost of living in America today.
That's not true. That's absolutely not true. If you choose to live in LA, Chicago, New York, Miami, Seattle, one of these expensive cities, that's on you. Move. Move. There are plenty of cities around those that are maybe an hour or two away where you can live a more rural. And if you sit there and say, well, I don't want to live there, great. Then don't complain when you don't have money. I had a friend of mine who moved to New York City in 2005, and she was making six figures, and she said to me one day, I can either afford a flat screen TV or dental work. Okay, you're living in the wrong city. Well, Paul, I can't move. This is the job You're telling me you can't find any job in the world in a more reasonable living city. No, of course you can.
Cost of healthcare, that has skyrocketed. The cost of attending college has skyrocketed. The cost of purchasing a home has skyrocketed. But nowhere has anyone said wage growth is up 15%, right?
Take a look at some of the most essential expenses for Americans. The median monthly rent in the US is $2,029 as of June 2023. That amount already accounts for over 46% of the Americans' median pre-tax income. But most US agencies classify spending more than 30% of one's gross monthly income on rent as being rent-burdened. Meanwhile, the median mortgage payment for a 2,400 square foot house was $1,957 per month. However, a common rule of thumb advises spending 28% or less of your pre-tax income on mortgage payments. For the median gross monthly earnings, that translates to just $1,232.
It's driving me nuts. They keep saying 1,232, $3,308. It's like $3,308. Just say it.
As we talk to households and talk to consumers out in the real world, especially those, say, under 40, housing is the big issue. You know, rent, mortgage. It is the biggest concern that people aren't going to be able to make the next payment.
Inflation is really hurting individuals having stability in their housing. And I think sometimes we underestimate that if you have uncertainty in your housing, it causes uncertainty everywhere.
Housing is also the reason why cities have become more.
This is why you moved to LA. That house right there is probably $700,000 in LA, $600,000. I'm so sorry to say this. You chose your city. And if you say, well, no, I was born here, then move. That's very simple. Move. Everybody makes fun of me for living in Ohio. I can afford to live anywhere in the world I want, literally anywhere, and afford a beautiful home there. And I'm like, I love Northeast Ohio. Why? Because it allows me to do other things. My idiot cousins in San Francisco, I once got in an argument with my one cousin who said to me, you don't get it. San Francisco, it's awesome. The culture, the museums. When was the last time you went to the museums? Well, that's not the point, Paul. I could go there. Okay, sounds good. And now Nordstrom's leaving your city. The offices are vacant. Why? Because of the homeless crisis, because of the poverty, because of how everything is so expensive. You guys make this. And I'm not saying you, the person watching this. I'm sitting there saying society made this happen. And the fact you're watching this video probably makes you more responsible than the average person. But we are in charge of our own destiny and our own future. The second we start blaming other people, it becomes a society of lack of personal responsibility and entitlement. Let's go to the next clip now.
The Federal Reserve has implemented 11 interest rate hikes to combat inflation since March 2022. But more than a third of Americans said rising interest rates kept them from financial comfort.
Higher interest rates really can stand in the way of affordability for many financial activities or decisions that people want to engage in, and home purchases is sort of at the top of that list.
Look at the person who was going to buy a house that was, let's say, $375,000 2 years ago. Their monthly payment.
Oh, yeah, guys, but inflation was affecting everyone, as Jerome Powell said. I think he's right on. So if inflation was still, if interest rates were low, but inflation was 10 or 11%, what would people be saying? Oh my God, cost to put gas in my, cost of food. It's like, oh yeah, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You got to pick one or the other. And right now we're coming off a history of a lot of people owning homes very inexpensively. If interest rates had gone to 1%, 3% would have seemed absurd. Oh, interest rates have tripled. Okay, what are we gonna do? Can't have your cake and eat it too, folks. Now, let's go to the next one.
More risk averse in that space.
Credit is essential because Americans don't have the savings to cover big expenses. More than 40% of Americans blamed insufficient retirement funds or emergency savings as the reason for financial insecurity.
Most Americans blamed that. How does the money get in the account? By you putting it there. So don't blame it. Blame yourself. This is very obvious to me. The money doesn't magically appear in your account. You have to put it there. If you are not putting it there, you are to blame. And again, guys, I'm not gearing this as the people watching the video. I'm just saying you in general. Let's keep going.
For a lot of people, just to feel subjectively feel financially better, they need some amount of savings. A lot of financial planners will say 3 months of your income. That's, for many people, so overwhelming that they can't even begin to think about it.
More than half of Americans today said they didn't have at least 3 months of emergency expenses saved. including 22% that said they had no emergency savings at all.
Well, my viewpoint on emergency savings is a lot different than most. I think it's absolutely taking money away from the most important years of your savings to save 3 to 6 months of emergency. I think to myself, if it's an emergency, have a credit card with 3 months of your expenses at the limit. Because the point is, it's an emergency. If you had to go do something, good, put it on the card, pay it off as fast as possible. I have a video where I talk about how an emergency fund can actually cost you $1 million in retirement because you're taking money out of the most important years of your life early on. I have a very different opinion on emergency funds. It's the go-to first day of financial planning 101. Talk about emergency funds. And listen, I have great friends who believe in that are financial planners. I just absolutely do not believe in it. I think to myself, emergency isn't for the 1 in 2, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 chance. Emergency is for the 1 in 30 chance. So have the credit card for it. That's my personal opinion.
It doesn't take unemployment to really knock
That's
somebody
true.
out of whack with respect to their personal finances if they're among the many Americans who say they cannot afford a $1,000.
Great. And if you're saving $500 a month and you have to put it on a credit card, then maybe you stop your savings for 2 months, pay off that credit card and move on. That's the point. Let's go to the next clip, guys.
Of Americans said they had more credit card debt than emergency savings. According to Experian, an average American holds a debt balance of $96,371, which includes several loan products like credit cards, auto loans, and mortgages.
That's very misleading. That doesn't sound bad to me. $96,000, including auto loans, credit card, student loans, probably credit card, house. I mean, come on, a house included in there. $96,000. Okay, thank you, U.S. government. You have attached debt to us at $96,000. Also, if you take the national debt and divide it by the number of Americans, it's about $95,000. So, okay, thank you. Now, guys, we're gonna go to the last clip.
Mostly things like consumer confidence or consumer sentiment, because what populates those data points are everyday measurements like inflation and the strength of the job market.
I think COVID really showed us that households, when they don't have a level of stability and security, are actually the primary foundation of whether the economy can be strong or not, because we are so based on consumer spending in this country.
Public policy.
That's such a generic statement. Okay, great. It's still about the individual. It's still about the individual no matter what. You either choose to spend or you choose not to spend. That's it. Listen, I like spending money. I enjoy it. I live a nice lifestyle. But if I had to cut back, I would cut back. Everybody has to make sacrifices. We're sitting there saying, you must have this. Why? Why must you have this? I'm going to say something very unpopular right now. People talk about the absolute importance of healthcare. I get it. It's a nice thing to have, but it's exactly like the thing about home ownership and going to college. Remember the go to college thing at any cost, essentially what it was 25 or 30 years ago? What's ended up happening now? Okay, what do you want to do about it? It's all in your personal beliefs and your personal behaviors of what can happen to you. Let's keep going on this video, guys.
Can greatly improve Americans'
No, they
chances
can't.
of achieving financial security.
God damn it.
So, for example, Social Security is the bedrock of most people's financial security in retirement. It's not the only source of their retirement income, but it keeps a lot of the older people out of poverty. And we know that Social Security needs some reforms in order to maintain its same level of benefits. And then also anything we can do to make sure that employers are offering any kind of retirement savings opportunities, emergency savings opportunities at work, offering employees the ability to enroll in benefits, whether that's health insurance or insurance for life insurance or disability insurance. You know, employers are a key part of this too, and public policies play a big role in terms of what employers can offer and at what price they can afford it.
The household's willingness to work toward financial security is also important.
All right, guys, I'm sure there's a lot of good in this video. I just get very triggered when people take away personal accountability. It's all about personal accountability. Are you the person who is saving first, spending with whatever's left over? Or do you do it the other way around? Pick the lifestyle you want, and then whatever's left over, you put in a savings. Spoiler alert, you're going to have very little left for savings, if anything at all. You got to work the other way around. You got to sit there and say, for me to hit my retirement goals, I need to save X. That is why in our software, the retirement calculator is so important, because you have to sit there and say, a friend of mine recently who makes 7 figures reached out to me and said, Paul, I feel like I have enough for savings. Do I have enough? I put it in retirement calculator and it scared her. But I was like, listen, this assumes a lot of things like spending. Is your spending going to stay the same? I'm like, it's probably not going to. But the point is, if she hadn't done that, she would have thought 10 million was enough for retirement. And based on her current spending, she needed 40 million and scared her. That's a big number, by the way, $40 million. But luckily, she's young and in a high-earning career. But I said to her, but remember, that's assuming you spend everything the same as you are today. She has 2 kids in private school. She has a nice home. And I'm like, it's probably not going to be the case. You're probably going to downsize or your house is going to be paid off. You're not going to have kids to put through private school for the next whatever years. I'm like, just relax. And I think it scared her too much. I actually owe her a text now to be like, hey, just remember, that was on a worst case. And I also did a below average returns on her investments. Okay. But the point is, I love what she said. She's like, oh man, maybe I can't afford the house I thought I could afford. I was like, maybe you can't. If you're struggling with investing or debt or any sort of lifestyle, subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of these. This is the reason why the channel is called Everything Money. We do a lot about saving, about investing, about retirement, because I just look at it as, and we do a lot about personal accountability. Your life will be better once you take personal accountability of your actions. Once you do that and it's not somebody else's fault, you realize the power you have in terms of controlling your financial future. Guys, if you've never done a budget for yourself, we have a budget template that we can send to you. Click the link below. It's absolutely free. Just click on it. It'll send you the budgeting template, allow you to at least start in that regard. So subscribe, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And I'm sorry if this offended anybody who lives above their means, but hopefully it's a good wake-up call for you.